What is going on, everybody? Julio here. And in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to build and deploy a responsive portfolio website for free. So stay tuned for the project overview coming up next. So this is the project that you're going to be building, and as you can already tell, it's a minimalistic look. It also has a dark and light theme, and on-scroll animations, just like the one that you see right there. You're also going to learn about tooltips and several other different types of hover effects, just like the ones you see on my screen. Then towards the bottom, we have a contact form that also has focus animations on the labels, and then it just moves up. So here we have a back to the top button, and also the links are going to be functional, as you can see right there. So let's quickly take a look at the responsive view just to see how everything scales as we make the viewport smaller. And as you can see, everything still looks pretty good on smaller devices. The inspiration for this design is one that I found on dribble.com. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, so it's only going to be inspiration. But other than that, let's not waste any more time. If you want to see more videos like this one, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Now, let's jump right in. Alright, so for those of you that want to follow along with me, make sure that you grab the asset files from the link in the description below. That's going to include everything you need to follow along with this project. So that being said, let me just minimize this so that I can have more room to work with. I also have the opened finished project here just so that I can use it as a reference. And then here, this is the project that we're currently viewing. And quickly going over the index.html. As you can see here, I'm just importing some resources like the box icons and ScrollReveal, and then we just have the usual stuff. So inside of the styles.css, it's kind of like the same deal, same thing with JavaScript. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is use the header element, and then I'm going to apply the class of header as well as an ID of home. And the ID, I'm only going to be using it for the link on the footer that's going to scroll all the way back up. Then in here, I'm going to have the nav element with the class of navbar as well as a class of container that is going to limit how wide this element is going to stretch to, just so that I can keep the layout consistent. Then inside of here, we are going to have a logo. So we are going to use an anchor tag and then the class of logo. We can point this back to the index.html, and in here we can just use the logo name, or in this case, I'm just using text, but you could use an image if you also had one. Underneath, I'm going to have a div that is going to group all of my buttons that I have here for the hamburger as well as the theme toggler. So I'm going to call this navbar buttons, like so. And then in there, I'm going to have two buttons. So the first button is going to have the type of button, and then it will have a class of button, then icon button, as well as a class of menu toggle button. Let me actually zoom out just a little bit. I think it should still show up fine on the screen. So this way we can see more of what's going on without having to have all the text wrapping all the time. So inside of this button, what I want to do is add some of the resources that I've imported, in this case, the box icons. So to use the hamburger menu icon, what we are going to do is use the I element here, and we are going to apply a class of bx, then a second class of bx, then menu, and then I'm going to apply my own class of open icon, just so that this way I can manipulate it later on without having to target the bx classes themselves. So as you just saw there, I duplicated the icon down below. Now what I'll do is just switch the class here to close icon, and then I'm going to switch the icon itself. So I'm going to switch the menu part to X. And now we should see the icons that we want, which we do. So for the second icon, it's going to be the same deal. So I'm just going to copy this one down below. Well, I should say button, not icon. And here, what I want to do is just modify the classes. So here, as opposed to saying menu toggle button, I'm going to say theme toggle button. Then for the icon classes, I'm going to replace menu here and this one as well. And the class that I'm going to add here is toggle left. And then here I can say theme off. It's going to be the same deal here for this one. So here we can do toggle right and then theme on. Again, these additional classes is just so that I can manipulate the element without having to use the box icon classes themselves, or having to, for example, target the parent and then the child. So now underneath of this navbar buttons div right here, I'm going to add in the menu items themselves. So I'm going to wrap this inside of another div, this one, with the class of menu. And this is just going to make the reset a lot faster later on. Although I don't think we're going to be doing much of a reset in this particular navigation, just because it's basically using the same for mobile as well as the desktop sizes. So in here, I'm going to have a UL that has the class of list. Inside of it, I'm going to have an li that has the class of list item. And then inside of here, I'm going to have an anchor tag that has the class of list link, like so. So if we go back to the finished project, if we open up the menu, you'll notice that we have here a number. And it kind of looks messed up, but that's because here I'm zooming in 150%. But anyways, back here, what I'll do is go inside of the anchor tag and I'm going to use a span element. And then here I'm going to put in the number. And this is going to be the basic structure for the navigation items. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it down below as many times as we need. In this situation, we only need 3. Now I can go ahead and add a space here and I'm going to add some text, so about me, and also apologize about my voice. I'm kind of dealing with a cold now, so my voice is, well, my nose, I should say, is a little bit congested. So it might just sound weird at times. So for the second one, we are going to do portfolio. Then for the third one, we are going to type in contact. So we are going to change the numbers here, like so. And I'm pretty sure that's everything we need for the header. So let's go back inside of the styles.css and let's start styling this so that we can make it look better. And we are going to start here with a basic reset as well as setting the base styles. So let me just copy this comment here and paste it underneath. And as I mentioned here, I'm just importing some additional assets, in this case from Google Fonts. And that's going to be the Playfair display font as well as pop-ins. So here for the text, we can just change this to base styles reset. Underneath, I'm going to start by targeting everything. So I'm going to use the universal selector. I'm also going to apply the reset to the before and after pseudo elements. So the way why it doesn't apply by just using the universal selector is because these elements don't really exist until you create them. And for the basic reset, I'm just going to reset the margin. Same thing for the padding. And I'm going to set the box sizing here to border box, and that's just going to make sizing your elements a lot simpler because things like paddings and borders are going to be taken into account inside of the element as opposed to outside of it, meaning that it's not going to add any extra width and height. Then underneath, I'm going to actually define some custom properties. So for this, we are just going to reference the root element. And this is kind of like scoping. So For example, if you have a variable here, it means that you can just use it anywhere throughout the entire style sheet. So to define a custom property, you use double hyphens and then the name that you want to use. In this case, I'm going to add in for the light color. So that's what I'm going to call it. And then I'm going to add in the color that I want. So in this case, it's going to be F3, F3, FE. Then we are going to do the same thing for the dark color, which is going to be 36, then 3636. And then we can just change the name here to black color, like so. And I'm also going to add some for the borders as well as the font family. But I don't really want to bore you by having you watch me type every single one of them one by one. So I'm just going to include all the custom properties inside of the starter files. This way you can just follow along right away. So I'll be right back once I add them in. So that's going to be every single custom property that we are going to be using. Like I said, I'm going to include it inside of the starter files so that you don't have to type them in. Then here we are going to continue by selecting the HTML document. And here what I'd like to do is add a font size of 10 pixels, but I do it in percentages just for the fact that, because of the fact that it's going to scale a lot better when you use something like the zoom feature here. Again, 62.5% is going to be 10 pixels. And I use rem units, so it's going to make the math a lot simpler as opposed to just having the default of 16 pixels and having to multiply each rem unit by that. Something else that I want to do next is select the body, and the body is just going to have a font family here, which is going to be the body font family of Poppins. Then for the font size, I'm going to give this 1.6 rem, which is going to be 16 pixels. And then the default line height that I'm going to set here is going to be 1.5. I'm also going to change the background color here, and I'm going to make it the light color. Then for the color of the page itself, this one is going to be the dark color. And it's not showing up for some reason. Oh, that's because I have black color here. So let me just change it to dark, because dark, it just makes a lot more sense. And the next thing that I'm going to do is add in a overflow X of hidden. And that's just going to hide the overflow here on the X axis. But for right now, you're not going to see much of a difference. And that's because right now we are not using this, but it will come in handy later on when we do the on-scroll animations, since we are going to have some elements that are going to be basically out of view before they animate. So that's going to give us some scroll bars, which we don't want. So the overflow X of hidden here is going to make sure that it's going to be hidden. So now what I want to do is select the body again, and I'm going to say that when the body has the class of theme dark, or dark theme, I should say, I want to basically just change the colors that I have here. And it's just going to be these three, like so. And what I want to do is basically just make the light color dark, and then the dark color light, like so. In this one, since we have here a black color for the RGBA, we are going to change this one to white, which is 255, 255, and so on. Now I'm going to select all of the anchor tags, and I'm going to get rid of the text decoration by setting it to none. Then the color, I wanted to inherit it from its parent. And then as far as the outline, I'm going to change it and make it none. Then we are going to make working with images easier. So here I'm going to set a max width of 100%, and that just means that it's not going to overflow its parent. And then here we're just going to give it a display of block. Now I'm going to select all of the lists, And list style here is going to be set to none. Then underneath of here, I'm going to select all of these span elements, and by default, they're going to be inline elements, but I'm going to make them display of inline block. And that's just going to make it so that when we work with vertical paddings and margins and things like that, so that it works, because if it's an inline element, it's just not going to work at all. I'm going to select all of my eye elements, which I used for the icons, and I'm going to set a default font size here of 2.4 rem, and that's just going to make it larger. So as far as the inputs, which is going to be for the form and buttons, as well as the text area, what I'll do here is just select all of them. And I'm going to also reset some of the values here. So the font, I want it to be inherited. So I'm just going to add that in. And the font here is just the shorthand for font style, font variant, font weight, font size, and so on. Then the color is going to be inherited as well. The background color here is going to be transparent. Then the border is going to be set to none, and the outline here to none as well. So now we have a pretty bare bone button. So that's going to be it for this particular reset / base styles. So here I'm going to add in a comment, and this comment is going to be for, I should just stop being lazy and comment it out myself. But, you know, sometimes we're just lazy like that. So here we are going to have a comment for reusable classes. And for the time being, it's just going to be there. We're not going to use it. But as we go on, certain classes that we reuse over and over, we are going to grab it from wherever we type it in and then just move it up here so that we can group them together. And it's just going to make finding things later on, if you have to, a lot simpler. So now let's go ahead and add in another comment, and this comment is going to be for the header, like so. So here, what we are going to do is apply a margin bottom to the header. And the margin bottom is going to be 5 rem. Like so. So that's going to give us some additional separation between the header elements as well as the hero later on. Then I'm going to select the nav bar. And here I'm going to give this a display of flex. Then I want to align my items to the center. Then I want to justify my content of space between, or to space between, I should say. So now everything is going to have some space in between each group. The next thing that I want to do is give this a height. So the height is going to be 8 rem. And then the position is going to be relative, just because of the position of absolute that we are going to have later on for the menu when we hide it behind the hamburger menu as well as the toggle buttons. Now I'm going to select the container, and the container is going to have a max width, which is going to be the container with a custom property that we defined. Then we want to add a margin 0 in auto, just so that it centers the container in the middle of the page once we have enough room. Then for the padding, what we want to do here is add 0 for top and bottom. And then here we can just add in the container padding custom property. And this should be inside of the var. So container padding, like so. And that's just going to add in this 1.5 rem on the sides. So the container class is going to be one of those reusable classes. So let's go ahead and copy it, delete it from there. And now we can just put it in here like so. And again, later on, as we work with this project, this reusable classes list is going to keep growing. So the next thing that I want to target is going to be the logo. And the logo is going to have a font family, which is going to be the title font family. Then I'm going to give it a font size of 3 rem. And then a font weight of 600 just to make it bolder. And the color here is going to be the dark color, like so. Actually, we don't need to add it in just because of the fact that we are inheriting the color from the parent, which is going to be this dark color that we have here. So back to this, the next thing that I want to target is going to be the navbar buttons div. And this is going to have a display of flex as well, mostly just for alignment purposes. So here I'm going to use a gap. And I guess I don't really need to use the shorthand here, so I could just say column gap instead. If I can type it correctly, that is. And the gap that I want to apply here is going to be something small like 0.5 rem. As far as the padding, same deal, 0 top and bottom, 0.5 rem left and right. Then the background color here is going to be the dark color. Then the color for the items themselves is going to be the light color. And then here I want to apply a border radius of 0.4 rem. And then the position here is going to be relative. And the C index is going to be very high just so that I can keep this particular container on top of the rest of the content. So obviously it's not going to be looking great so far. And that's because here we still have to hide the icons that we don't need for the time being. But before we get to that, I'm going to select my button class. And this will just have a cursor of pointer. So now when we hover over it, you see that it's clickable, or gives you the perspective of it that it's clickable. Then I'm going to select the icon button class. And this class is going to have a width of 4 rem. Then it's going to have a height of 4 rem as well. And then display of flex, because it's going to allow me to align the icon inside of this container. And I'm not going to use justify content or anything like that, because we can do this with one line by just selecting the icon button and then the icon inside of it, and we can do a margin of auto like so. So now you see that it changes. So the next thing that we are going to do now is hide the buttons that we are not using. So here I can just select the close icon as well as the theme on icon. And then I can just do a display of none, and we should only have 2 icons now. Then what we are going to do is select the menu. So the menu is going to have a position of absolute because we want to move it freely inside of this nav element. And here I'm going to be positioning it to the right by 1.55 rem. And the way that I come up with this is just by kind of messing around with it and seeing what works and what doesn't. Then for the background color here, we can use the dark color. Same deal here for the links. So we are going to make this the light color. And then I want to apply some padding all around. So I'm going to do 0.8 rem top and bottom, 1.5 rem left and right. And the next thing that I'm going to add in is the border radius of 0.4 rem, just to keep everything consistent. And then finally here, I'm going to add a negative C index of -1. That's just going to make sure that it stays behind this button group that we have here. And for the time being, that's going to be it for the menu, but we are going to come back to it later just because we still have to add some additional styles for JavaScript later. So now I'll go ahead and select the list, and this will have a display of flex. And the gap that I'm going to set for spacing is going to be 2.5 rem. Now underneath, what I'm going to do is select the links that are Then underneath, what I'm going to do is select the links that are directly inside of the list that is inside of the menu div, if that makes sense. So to put it into perspective here, I'm going to select the menu, then the list that is a direct child, and then the list link that is inside of it, like so. And then the text decoration here is just going to be set to uppercase, not text decoration, text transform, I should say. Like so. Then what I'm going to do is select the list link. So this is going to be for the list link in general. And here I'm going to apply a font size of 1.4 rem, just to make it slightly smaller. And well, we don't need to set a color here because it's already being inherited. So I'm just going to leave that as is. And now what I will add is a hover effect. So list link. And then we can say unhover. And we are going to do the same thing on focus. So let me just copy that down below, add in focus. And what I want to do here is just change the opacity to 0.7. And that's just going to make it lighter. Now I want to select the span inside of the list link. And what I'm going to do here is just set the font weight to bold, like so. Let me actually scroll down a little bit more just so that it's we get some more room here. And the only thing left here is to basically just go ahead and add in the JavaScript styles so that we can make this navigation functional. So as I mentioned, we are going to go back to this menu here and we are going to add the styles that we need to make the JavaScript functional. So underneath of here, I'm going to set the pointer events to none. And that's just going to make it so that nothing here, for example, is clickable. That's the logo that we are actually hovering over, not the links. As you can see, they don't work. But if I was to comment this out, now, well, it still doesn't work, and that's because it's underneath, so we can't really test it out. But it doesn't really matter for now. It's going to come into play later. So for the time being, what I'm going to do is set the transform scale here to 0 so that we can shrink it all the way down. Then what I want to do is add a transition here. And the transition is going to be on the transform, like so. And it's going to be over 0.25 seconds, and it will have a 0.25 second delay. Then for the easing here, we can just add a cubic Bezier of 1, 0, 0, 1. I also want to hide the list itself just because I want to fade it in. So underneath of here, it's going to be the same deal. I only want to apply the styles to the list inside of the menu. So I'm going to select the list that is a direct child of the menu element, like so. And I'm going to set the opacity here to 0. So let's scroll back down and now we can go ahead and add in the JavaScript styles. So let's add a comment here and say JavaScript styles, like so. And I'm going to start by adding an active class that doesn't exist. And it's going to be created later on with JavaScript and then applied to our elements. So I'm going to say that when this active class is present and it's on the menu, I want to apply the following styles. So basically the C index here is going to be set to initial, like so. And then what I want to do is set the pointer events back to initial as well. So to go over a little bit more on the C index, so before we put it behind it, and that's because, for example, when we activate the menu, it would show on top of this, which is not what we want for the animation. So actually, it's going to be a lot better if I show you guys what I mean. So I'm going to comment this out for now. And later, you can actually see this into play. But anyways, back to this. Now, the transform, what I want to do here is set the scale back to 1. And then for the translate on the Y, I want to basically move it by 4.5 rem. Now I'm going to basically do the same thing that I did before and then select the list that is inside of there. And the opacity here is going to be set to 1, and then the transition here is going to be on the opacity, and it's going to be over 0.1 second, and it's going to have a delay of 0.5 seconds. Then we have to do the same thing for the icons. But right now, I'm actually just going to go inside of the JavaScript, and we can continue to add the additional styles that we need as we go. So the first thing that we are going to do here is just define some variables. And here we can just say toggle. Let me just make it uppercase. So toggle navigation menu and icons. And what we are going to do is define a constant variable here. I'm going to call this one menu toggle. We can call it button. Then what we can do is say document dot query selector. And in here, we would just want to pass in the class of this particular element. So menu toggle button. I'm going to copy it down below. Now I'm going to change the class here just to menu. And then we can go ahead and change the name of the variable here to menu element, like so. So what I'm going to do now is create a function. And this function is going to be for toggling the classes. So constant, and then toggle menu. This is going to be an arrow function. And what I want to do in here is, as I mentioned, I want to toggle the class on the menu element. So class list, toggle, and now we can just go ahead and pass in the active class. So if we go ahead and add the event listener to the menu toggle button, which is going to be of click. And then in here, we can just toggle menu, which is going to be the function that we created. So if we try that out, everything should now be working, and it is. Notice, however, though, it's growing from the center, which is by default what it's supposed to do. But if we go back to the completed project here, notice how it grows from the right. So let's go ahead and fix that. So to fix that, all we have to do is just go back here, and we can add a transform origin to the right. So now if we click it, that's going to be corrected. Now the second part is how we had the C index. So here by default, we send it to the back. But there's another issue, and that is that, for example, once we open it, we want to set it so that it's always on top. So that's what we did here. So let me just comment that out. And now when it goes, for example, back out, notice how it's always on top now. And then here towards the end of the animation, it just goes back in. Well, you can't see it all that well because, again, I'm just scaling this by 150%. But after the delay, you can kind of see how it works. Anyways, the next thing that I want to do is make sure that I switch the icons when we click this button. So still within the styles as CSS, what we want to do is just select the active class again. And then this time around, we are going to be applying it on the menu icon or button, I should say, itself. So on this button that we have here. And then we just basically select the icon that is inside of it. So active and open icon, we want to set it to be a display of none, and that's going to hide it. Then active close icon, this should be a display of block because we want to show it. Obviously, if we click it, nothing is going to happen. And that's because we still haven't added that in. So back inside of the JavaScript, what we want to do here is just duplicate this down below. And what we want to do is just change this to menu toggle button. And now if we click it, notice how the icons are being switched. We still have to sort this one out as well. So back inside of the styles.css, this one is going to be when the dark theme is present, or the dark theme class, I should say. So when it's present, I want to target the theme off button. And then this is going to have a display set to none. And same deal as we did before with the other button. Down below, now we change this one to on and this one to block. And still nothing's going to happen because we still have to add in the functionality for this button, not this one. So just to demo how it's going to work, for example, here, we can add the class of dark theme. Now the colors are going to transition, and notice how the icon is changing as well. Now this is for demo purposes, so let's just go ahead and remove that from here because we are going to be manipulating that with JavaScript. So back in here, what I want to do is also, so for example, when we click the link, we also want to be able to close the menu since this is a one-page layout. So let's go ahead and add that functionality as well. So what I'm going to do is just add another comment. So actually stop being lazy and just type it manually. So we can say here, remove active class from menu and icon on link, click. And then we can just comment that out. And what we want to do in here is we have to loop over every single link that we have here. So to do that, I'm going to be creating another function here. And let me just make sure that I actually click the editor to focus. So here I'm going to be calling this function remove active link class. And it's a little bit long, but we have to make sure we describe what we are doing. So remove active link class. And this one is going to be an arrow function. So this one is going to have a placeholder variable. And what we want to do in here is basically, as I mentioned, not loop over the classes. There's a simple way actually. So we can check whether the target contains the class of list link and then just add that event listener to the document object instead. So that's going to save us a lot more time as opposed to looping through every single one of them. So what we are going to do here is set an if statement. And what we are going to say is that if the E, so in this case, this variable is just going to be a placeholder for whatever element we are clicking. So the E parameter. So target, see, so if E target and then here contains class list, actually class list comes before contains. So if E target class list dot contains, and here we just pass in the name of the class that we want to look for. So list link. So if it contains this list link class, we want to remove the classes from this element. So for example, right now the classes are active. So what we are going to do is grab this that we have here, paste it in here, And now we are going to change the toggle portion to remove instead, like so. So if we go ahead and add the event listener here to the document object, so here, document, add event listener, and this one is going to be of click as well. And then we just pass in the remove active link class function. So if we go ahead and test that out, you'll see that everything opens normally. If I close it, it works fine. But now here's where the real test begins. So if I click the link, everything is just going to go away. And later on, when we have more content, we are also going to basically scroll to each individual section. So just to give you guys a look, for example, on how this is working, we can just have an else case here. And we can say something like console.log does not have the list link class, just to show you guys how it works. So here, for example, if I open up the inspector and I go to the console, if I click anywhere on the page, notice how, well, the target doesn't really have that class, whether it's the menu or everything else. But the moment I click the link, well, it does have the class. So here we can just, for example, test that out. And it does have the list link class. So here, if we try that again, notice how when I click the link, it says it does have the list link class. So everything is working exactly how we want it. And this is just a simpler way of doing so. Originally, I just planned on looping through every single class that we have here for the list link, but that is not going to be as efficient as doing this. So the next thing that I want to sort out is making this button work and also toggling the classes for the dark theme that is going to store the theme selection. So here we are not going to be doing anything more within the CSS. So still inside of the app.js. Here we are going to have another comment. So let me just remove this space here. And underneath of here, let's just add the comment. This one is going to be for toggle theme and store selection within local storage. And here we are going to start by defining some additional variables. So it's going to be very similar to this one. So I'm just going to copy it down below, and I can change this one to theme toggle button, and then here the menu class to theme as well. We need to be able to select the body, so constant. We can say body element. And then as opposed to using documents like by class name or query selector, we can do that a lot simpler by just saying document.body. And for now, that's everything that we need to do. Now we are going to be creating the function for toggling the class and also adding the selection to local storage. So const and then toggle theme. And what we are going to be doing, technically, like JavaScript is going to assume that a semicolon goes here. So if you wanted to, you don't have to add them in. It's just a habit. That's why I add them in myself. But anyways, back here, we are going to select the body element, and then we just want to toggle the class list. And then here, it's going to be the dark theme. It should be two toggle instead, I should say. So toggle the class to dark theme. And if, for example, we tried that out now by selecting the theme toggle button, we add the event listener here, which again is going to be a click event. And then we pass in the toggle theme like so. If we try that out, now notice how it changes, but if we refresh the page, everything just goes back to normal. And that's because we still have to obviously add the theme to local storage. So to do that, we are going to have an if statement here. And what we want to do is also have an else case. So within the if statement here, what we are going to evaluate is whether the body currently has the class list of dark theme. So we can say body element class list dot contains, and then we can say dark theme like so. So if it has this theme, we want to add that particular value to local storage. So to do that, all we have to say is local storage and then set item. And then inside of here, this is basically going to work the same way as a key value pair. So here, I'm just going to call this one dark theme, maybe. Well, let me just use the camel case instead. Doesn't really matter, but just a preference. And then here, I can say it's active. And here you can see a description of the values and whatnot. So once we have that, what we are going to do next is basically do the opposite here. So if it doesn't have the class, we want to remove it from local storage. So let me just copy this. And then I can just paste it here. And as opposed to saying set item, we are going to say remove item. And then all we have to do, all we need is just the item name that we have here. So we can get rid of this portion like so. Now that by itself is still not going to work, because if we still, for example, tried to switch it here and refresh the page, notice how it's not there. And that's because we still have to grab this current value that is within local storage and then have another evaluation to determine whether we are going to keep the theme in particular that we want. So we're going to go up here. I'm going to define another variable, and this is where we are going to get the local storage item. So I'm going to call this current theme, and I'm going to say local storage get item. And then here we just get the item that we want. So remember, we called it dark theme. So that's exactly what we are going to pass in. And now we can evaluate whether a theme exists. So we are going to basically just have another if statement here. And then we can just pass in the current theme. And in here, we can just say, I mean, we don't need the curly braces, to be honest, but I'm just going to add them in anyways. And then here we can just say body element. We can just grab it from here and then change toggle to add. And notice how it's already, as it refreshed, it's already adding it, even though we haven't clicked the button since. And that's because the value, when we clicked it before, it was already stored inside of local storage. The only thing we needed to do was just get the item and evaluate whether it was present or not. And that's why it's taking effect now. So if we click it, you see that it changes. We refresh it, we still have the light theme. We go back to the dark theme, we refresh it again, it's still there. So now we know that everything is working correctly. So that's going to be it for this JavaScript portion. The last part of the JavaScript is going to be for the ScrollReveal, but we're not going to mess with that until the end of the project. So same deal here for the JavaScript, the styles .css. So what I'm going to quickly do here is just add a comment before we move on to the HTML of hero, because that's just the next section that we are going to be working with. So as I said, let's go back inside of the index.html, scroll down, and then we can go inside of this hero section comment so that we can continue working with this project. So once in here, what we are going to do is start by using the section element, apply a class of hero as well as a class of section. The section class is going to have general styles for all the sections that we are going to have. Then I'm going to reuse the container element here for consistency when it comes to the spacing and entire width of this container, which we used before on the nav bar. And then in here, we are going to have an h1 that has the class of title as well as the class of main title. Now, remember that the h1 heading element is going to be your most important heading in the document, and it's going to help screen readers as well as SEO. So you should only have one h1 throughout the entire page. And all we are going to do here is just have some text as well as this image and some pseudo elements. And to do that, I'm actually going to give myself some more room to work with. Then in here, I'm going to add some text, then followed by a span that is going to have the class of inline image as well as a class of has sparkles. And that's just going to be a class that I'm going to keep reusing so that I can add the sparkles. Let me get rid of the space here. And let me go ahead and add the rest of the text for creative. Now I'm going to add a line break. So we are going to be using the BR element. And then we are going to add the rest, which is going to be UX, UI, designer. Then again, we are going to have another line break, and this one is going to be for developer. And what we are going to do here is actually put the R inside of another span, like so. And technically, we don't need the space here, so we can just remove it. And again, the reason why I'm wrapping the R here inside of a span is because I'm going to be using position relative here on the R. And then position absolute on this image right here, because I want this image to be relative to the R and not the entire H1. So I'm going to give this a class as well. And this class is going to be has sparkles alt, like so. And that's going to be it for the hero. So let's go ahead and go back inside of the styles.css. And underneath of the hero comment, we can begin with the hero styles. So the first thing I'm going to do is target the section class. And I'm going to be applying a padding block, which means padding top and bottom. And I'm going to be using the custom property here of section vertical spacing, like so. Then I'm going to add a position of relative, and this class is going to be a reusable class. So let's go ahead and just delete it from here. And we can paste it up here underneath of the reusable classes comment, like so. So the next thing that I'm going to do is target the title. So the title is going to have general styles for all the titles that we are going to be having on this site. And I'm going to apply a font family, which is going to be the title font family. Underneath, I'm going to add a font weight, which is going to make it lighter. And then a text transform of uppercase. Now I'm going to target the main title by itself because I don't want every single title to be the same, especially the main one. And here we are going to add some responsive typography. So we are going to use font size, and then we will use clamp, like so. And how this works is that you're going to specify 3 values. You're going to specify a minimum value. You're going to specify an ideal value and then a maximum one. So for the minimum, it's going to be 5 rem. Then for the ideal one, we are going to use the viewport width here, which is going to be 10. And then finally for the maximum, we are going to specify 10 rem, like so. So now, for example, if I go ahead and resize this, notice how the text is going to grow with the window as well as get smaller. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but for this particular project, it's more than enough. Then I want to text align to the center. And then for the line height, I'm going to make it smaller at 1.2, just like so. Now I'm going to target the inline image class. And in here, I'm going to give this a width of 7 rem. Same thing for the height. Then we are going to use the background property here. And what we are going to do here is go inside of the images folder, and we are going to find the statue hero PNG. And that's going to give us the image. It's already showing up, but obviously the image itself is not where we want it to be. So as far as the position here, we can do a top center like so. And that's starting to move it a little bit there. Then I want this to not repeat. And then we can do a background size of cover, not contain. And that's going to fix it for us, just like so. Now I'm going to make this round. So for this, I'm going to use a border radius of 50%. Then I'm going to reset the border here on the bottom left. So for this, I can just do border bottom radius. Should be to the left, not the right. And here we can just set this back to 0, like so. So now it looks more like the one we have here. We also have to add some separation. And for this, we are going to use a margin. We are going to be using the shorthand. So we'll do 0 top and bottom, and then 1.5 rem left and right. The next thing that I'm going to do now is add the has sparkle effect, which is going to be this image that we have here. So let's target that class like so. And I'm also going to target the has sparkles alt because they are going to be sharing the same relative position. And what I want to do next now is add this in as a pseudo element before and after. So I'm going to say has sparkles before, and then let me actually just copy it down below. And now I can just change it to after. And what I want to do here is add general styles that they both are going to share. So for this, I can say content, position, which is going to be absolute, and then the same image. So for this, we are going to use the background property again. And in fact, we can just copy it from here, be a little bit lazy. And then we can just go ahead and change it to the image that we want. In this case, it's going to be sparkle light. And that's going to give us the sparkle for the light background. So it's going to be a black one. And then underneath of here, well, we actually don't need this. We can just do center here, like so. And what we can do here underneath is say background size and set it to cover as well. Now we are going to target them individually because they're not going to be exactly the same positioning wise and size wise. So for this, I'm just going to copy this one, paste it down here, and then I'll do the same thing for this one. And I'm going to paste it underneath like so. So for the before pseudo element, what I want to do is give this a width of 1 rem. I'm going to do the same thing for the height. And now it's starting to show up. And actually, that's not the one that we want. We want the regular one. So it's going to be this one, and that's going to give us the black one. And the next thing that I want to do here is add the positioning. So we are going to start at the top at negative 0.5 rem. And that's going to move it up a little bit. Then we are going to specify the right. So for the right, we are going to do negative 0.5 rem. And we also have to, since we are going to be reusing this class for the sparkles, I'm going to specify that I actually want these styles we have here to only apply to this inline image. So what I'm going to do is say inline image like so. Since here we have those two classes together, we have to make sure that we chain them. So that's why we use the dot and not a space, because if you do a space, it just means that it's going to be the element that is inside of this inline image. And obviously we don't have anything inside of it. So what we are going to do here is the same thing for the after. Let's make sure we specify it's a class. And the content is going to be the same. We just have to edit the numbers. So this one is going to be 0.8 rem. Same thing for the height. And then for the starting top position, we are not going to have a top position. Instead, we are going to have a bottom. And this one is going to be 1 rem. Then for the right, we can do 1.5 rem here. And now we have the sparkles exactly where we want them to go. Since we are going to be reusing this, what we are going to do is move it up to the, actually before I move them up, let me add the styles for the dark theme. So that's going to turn them white. So here what we are going to do is say dark theme like so. And remember the dark theme is on the body itself. So this time we do have to specify a space because it means find the has sparkles class that is inside of the body, which is going to be this. So let's just copy this right here like so. Make sure we close it. And then we also have to add it in front of this one. And now all we have to do is just copy this portion of the background as well as the background size. And all we have to do now is just change the image to the light one, like so. So if we go ahead and test that out, if we transition into the dark theme, notice that the images are being switched as well. So as I mentioned, now let's grab this, remove it from here, and we can move it up to the reusable classes. Then what I'm going to do is target the alt. So for this, we are going to say has sparkles alt. And then for the content here, in fact, what I could have done, let me see. So since here we only have, well, we added the image here itself, so I guess that's not going to work. So let's just forget about it. Because I was planning on just having them together, but they have an image, so it wouldn't make sense. Anyways, back here, we can just say content, set it to an empty string. Position is going to be absolute. Then I'm going to do a top of 50%. Then what I'm going to do is, well, in fact, just so that we can see what's going on, let me go ahead and comment this out for now. And what I'll do is add the width, which is going to be 5 of the BW. Then I'm going to set a max width here so that it doesn't grow any more than that. And I'm going to set it to 5 rem. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the height. So 5 BW and a max height of 5 rem, like so. So that means that it's not going to get any larger than that. Then for the background here, we are going to do the same thing, URL. We are going to go outside of the CSS folder, inside of the images folder, and then we are going to find the sparkle alt. Center, no repeat. And let's just put this inside of quotation marks, like so. So once we do that, we have to add in the background size of cover. And I'm always doing contain for some reason. And that's pretty much all we have to do there. So now what I'm going to do is just specify here. Well, not necessarily specify. And actually, I made a mistake here. So that's because this should have been on the pseudo element, not the element itself. So what I'm going to do is say here is say after, like so. So now it's looking more like how we want it to look. And it's going to be the same deal. We are going to do the same thing that we did. And we'll do has sparkles alt after. And then we are going to copy this portion. And now all we have to do is just switch the images. And that's going to work exactly how we want it to work. So the next section that we are going to, well, we have an issue here, and that's with the items here that we have for the navigation. And that's because we are inheriting it. So I think that what we have to do is actually, as opposed to just doing the whole inheriting thing, it's better if we go back to the list link here and we specify that we do want a color, which is going to be the dark color, like so. So let's see if that fixes it. So light color. Oh, so by default, we are here inside of the white, and this is dark, so we have to make this light instead. And now that shows up. So let's go ahead and take a look at how it looks on the white background. And now that is fixed, so it's a good thing that I caught it in time. The next section that we are going to work on is going to be the About section. And here we are going to do the same thing that we did before. So in fact, I'm just going to copy this portion, paste it in here. Then I can just close this div, and I'm going to do the same thing for the section. And let's make sure that we line that up properly, like so. So for this section, we are going to rename this hero class to About Me. Then we still keep the section class, and we are going to add an ID. This ID is going to be for the navigation later on. So we can just call this one About Me. Then inside of this container, I'm going to have the section description. So that's going to be this data right here, as well as the image and this skills section with the tooltips. So let me just go back. And now in here, I'm going to have a div that has the class of section description. Then I'm going to apply an additional class of dgrid, and this dgrid class is going to turn any element into a grid container. So that's going to be another one of our reusable classes. Then in here, I'm going to have a div, and this div is going to have a class of ScrollReveal left, like so. So this particular class, it's going to be for ScrollReveal. It's not really part of ScrollReveal, but I'm going to be using it to select this particular element so that I can animate it. So ScrollReveal left is just a hint for me to, so that I know that it's gonna be animated from the left. Then inside of here, I'm going to have a p tag that will have the class of description, like so. So what I'm going to do now is copy the text as well. And I'm going to include this text inside of the HTML file so that you can just go ahead and copy it yourself and not have to type it in manually. So that's going to be the text. The span that we have for text bold here, this is only going to have a font weight here so that we can make portions of the text stand out like how we have here. The next thing that I'm going to do is go outside of this ScrollReveal left div, and then we are going to have the container for the image. So this one I'm going to call ScrollReveal and then right. So it's going to do the same thing, except that it lets me know that I'm animating it from the right. And what I want to do here is add an image, and this image is going to be inside of another wrapper that I'm going to call description. Description, image, and then the class of has sparkles. Just like so. Because you can't really use pseudo elements on images, so I'm wrapping it on here with the div so that I can use the pseudo elements on this div and not the image itself. So now I can just go ahead and add the image that is going to be found inside of the assets folder, then images, and then we want Bruno, just like so. And the next thing that we have to add now is going to be the skills section. So for this, we are going to actually go outside of this section description that we have. So that would be this one. We still want to be inside of the container though, just so that we can keep the spacing on the sides. Then we are going to have a div here that has the class of tech stack, as well as the class of the grid. Then in here, we are going to have divs, and then we are going to have the icons themselves, like so. So the div is going to have the class of tech stack item, like so. And I also want to add a data attribute here. I'm going to call it tooltip. And this is just so that I can later pass in this HTML5 value, and then I can grab it directly from here when I use the pseudo elements inside of the content property. So in here, I just want to have the icon itself. So the box icon class for HTML5 is going to be bx, and then an additional class of bxl HTML5, like so. And let's not forget to tab that over for the auto completion, and now we get the icon. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it down below as many times as I need, and then just make some changes to the icons. So for the second icon, we are going to have one for CSS, so CSS 3. Then we are going to have one for JavaScript. Then we are going to have one for React. And then we are going to have one for Sketch. I was going to do one like Figma, Adobe XD and whatnot, but they don't really have an icon for that. And that looks good. That's pretty much all the icons that we need. So let's jump back inside of the style sheet so that we can make this look even better. So again, let's go ahead and start with a comment. And something I just noticed is that I forgot to add the semicolon here. So let's add that in. And now this comment is going to be for the about me section. So about me, just like so. So let me just comment that out. And well, here I have added styles. So I guess I'll just do the same thing to keep everything consistent, although it's not really a big deal if you don't add it in. And what I want to do here is go ahead and add in the dgrid class, dgrid, and then it's going to have a display of grid. As I mentioned, this is going to be a reusable class, so let's go ahead and remove it and move it all the way back to the top under here. So now that every item that has this class is a grid container, we can go ahead and use some CSS grid properties on it. So I'm going to start by selecting the section that is not the hero, like so. And I'm going to use the before pseudo element here. or create one, I should say. So this is why I applied a position of relative to each section. And this is also going to be a reusable class, technically, because it's part of the section class that we have here. And what I'll do here is just add a radial gradient on the background. So to do that, again, I'm going to set the content property to an empty string. Position is going to be absolute. I don't want to position it exactly towards the middle, so I'll do a top of 35%, but I do want to position it in the middle on the x-axis. So I'm going to do 50% there, and then we have to do transform translate, -50%, -50%. Then we are going to do a width and height, which is going to be 80 of the viewport width. You can make this bigger, you can also make smaller. You can do whatever you want. So we're going to do the same thing here. And now I'm going to add in the background, which is going to be a radial gradient that I generated online. I'm going to include this as well here within the CSS file so that you can just copy it and paste it here as opposed to having to copy every single line. Lastly, what I want to do here is make sure that I send it to the back by doing a C index of -1. So now if we scroll down here, we should be able to see this. So let me just, here for example, make this more visible. And there it is. So let me just undo that because I wanted it to be really subtle. And let me just go ahead, as I mentioned, grab it, and back inside of the reusable classes comment, I'm going to paste it here. This way we can just keep everything more organized. So that aside, what I'm going to do now is select the section description, and I'm going to add a gap here for separation. So this is a gap all around. So in this current view, it's going to add a gap column or row, I should say. So towards the bottom. And then when we move over to general, not general, but to larger screens, it's going to add it to the column instead. So to the side. Then I'm going to add a margin bottom. And it's going to be 2.5 rem. And that's going to create some additional separation between this and then the skills that we have. Then I'm going to select the description. Text transform here is going to be uppercase. Should be text transform, not decoration. And I'm also going to add a font weight. So I'm going to make the slider at 300. I'm going to select the text bold and make the font weight bold. We could have also used the strong tag, but it doesn't really matter. So next, I'm going to select the description image. Description image. And this is going to have a width of 25 rem. I'm going to do the same thing for the height. And next, I'm going to do a margin 0 of auto. So that's going to put the image towards the middle, like so. And finally, I want to do a transform rotate 25 degrees. Obviously, you can do this so that you can only have the mask itself be skewed or rotated, and then the image, for example, the person can be right straight. But obviously, I'm not gonna take the time to do this all within photo editing tools since I'm not really into any of that stuff. I just do the bare minimum, and this was it. But if you wanted to make it perfect, that's just something that you could do. The next thing that I want to target now is going to be the image itself. that is inside of this image description. So let me grab that, and I want to make sure that this is always 100%. So the width 100%, the height 100%, and then I can do an object fit here of contain. Just like so. Obviously, you're not going to see much of a change, but it's going to be there. Next, I want to add the sparkles. So I'm going to target the description image. Then we have to target the has sparkles before. Let's do the same thing for the after. And we can give this a width of 2 rem to make them larger. Same thing for the height, like so. And now, as you can see, they are showing up. Then we are going to select them individually just so that we can move them around freely. I'm going to now change this one to after, and then make sure I close this one. And now we can apply a top position, which is going to be of 10 rem. Right, we can do -1 rem, like so. So that's going to move it all the way to the right. And then here we have to do the same thing. Actually, I want to do this for the before instead. Here. Then for the after, I should say. For the before, I wanted to make sure that I put it towards the top. So this number is going to be a lot smaller. So it's going to be 2. And then it's going to be +1. So that's more of how we have it here. The next thing that I want to style is going to be the text, not the text, but the text stack. So text stack, and then this is going to have a max width of 50 rem. So that's as large as it's going to get. Then I'm going to apply a grid template columns. And what I'm going to do here is set up a responsive grid that is not going to require any media queries. So for this, we are going to start with the repeat function. Then we are going to say auto fit. And now we are going to use the min max function. We are going to specify a minimum value, and then we can just set this one to monfr. And just like so, you can see that it's now here looking a lot better. Then under here, I'm going to specify a gap, and this gap is going to be 2.5 rem. Just like so. Now I'm going to select the text stack item, and I'm going to do a display of flex. Then I want to align the icons perfectly in the middle. So I'm going to do line item center, and then justify content center as well. Then the position of relative because of the tooltip, which is going to have the position of absolute. Now I'm going to go ahead and select the icon that is inside of the text stack item. And what I'm going to do here is give this a font size, which is going to be 5 rem. And then I want to make it so that it fades a little bit. So I'm going to do 0.5 for the opacity, like so. I'm also going to do the same thing for the dark theme. So text stack, item, and then the opacity here is going to be 0.8 instead. So if we go ahead and test that out, you see that it's not as faded in as before. The next thing that I want to do now is select the pseudo elements themselves. Well, not select them, but create them, I should say. So text stack, item, before, we are going to do the same thing for the after. And for the position, it's going to be absolute. Starting top position is going to be -1 rem. And then I want to translate the y by negative 100%. Now, as far as the opacity, we are going to set it to 0 so that we don't initially see it. Then for the transition, we want to do a transform. It's going to be over 0.5 seconds. And we also want to animate the opacity, which is going to be over 0.5 seconds as well. Now we want to see this element as we work with it, so I'm going to comment that out for now. The next thing that I want to do is just target each one of them individually. So I'm going to start with the before, which is going to be for the arrow. So here the content is going to be an empty string. Then I'm going to do a border of 1 rem, solid, and then transparent. Now I'm going to target the border top color by itself. And this is going to be the dark color. And just like so, you can now see the little arrow pointing down and it's showing up. One last thing that I want to do here is change the transform translate y to 0. And that's just going to move it down. Then for the C index, I'm going to set it to 5. Now I'll do the same thing for the after. This is where the text is going to go. So for the content here, we are going to set the attribute, which is going to be the data tooltip. And here you can see that the text is now showing up. And if yours isn't showing up like that, it's because here, when I had the text, I realized that I still had HTML5 for every single one of them. So I just went ahead and changed it off screen. So once we do that, the next step is going to be giving this a width, which is going to be of max content. Then the background color, it will be dark as well. And for the color, we will set that to the light color. Then for the font size, we can do 1.8 rem. Actually, that's going to be too big, so we can just leave it at 1.6, although we already have 1.6 by default, so it's not like we have to do anything there text size wise. And next, I'm going to give it some padding, which is going to be 0.5 rem, top and bottom, and then I'm going to do 1 rem left and right. For the border radius, we can do 0.4 rem, and then we can move down, and now we can basically just sort out the hover effects. So we can now uncomment this out so that it's not visible by default. And what we are going to do here is target the before pseudo element when we hover over the text stack item. And what we are going to do here is set the opacity back to 1. So if we go ahead and do that, you can see that the little arrow here is now showing up. Then we are going to do the same thing for the after. And if we go ahead and show that, you see that it shows up, but it's not showing up exactly like the one we have here. So notice how it just animates in and it moves up and down. So to do that, we are going to, let me just go back. We are going to add in a transform, translate y here on the before. And we are going to do negative 0.6 rem. So if we test that out, you'll see that now the little arrow is moving up, but we also have to move up the after. So we are going to copy this, paste it down below. And as you can see, it just goes the opposite way. So it's not quite working. So what I'm going to do here is the opposite. So since we translated this by negative 100%, I'm going to use the calc function here. And what I'm going to do is say that calc negative 100% plus negative 0.5 rem. So now it should move up. And that's exactly how we want the animation to go. So that's going to be it for this portion. The next section that we are going to be working on is going to be for the portfolio section. So let me just quickly add in a comment here. Portfolio styles. Comment that out like so. And now we can go ahead and move here inside of the index.html. And inside of this comment, we can go ahead and start working on the next section. So what we are going to do is the same thing that we did before. So let me just copy this because I want to be lazy. And I'm going to paste it here. Then I'm going to change the section class from About Me to Portfolio. Then the ID here is going to be Portfolio as well. The container can still remain the same. Let's not forget that we have to close this div as well as the section tag. And now we're ready to continue. So the good thing here is that this is going to be heavily dependent on CSS grid. So we are going to learn on how we can basically just position this exactly how we want it. So for example, if I make it bigger so you can see, notice how the grid, it's not really a complex grid here layout that we have, but it's kind of interesting. And maybe something that I should consider adding in is maybe a container with 4 different breakpoints, just so that this doesn't look as stretched out. But I'm not sure yet. It's not something that is a big deal though. You can add it in if you wanted to. So for the time being, we can just go ahead and inside of this container, we are going to start by adding this section heading, which we are going to be reusing as well for the next section. And to do that, all we have to do is just add in a div. So this div is going to have the class of section title container, like so. Then I'm going to have an h2 that is going to have the class of title as well as the class of section title. And here we can just do resend. Then underneath, I'm going to have another div, and this is going to wrap this circle that we have here with the sparkles and projects. And the reason why I'm wrapping it inside of a div is because I'm going to be using Flexbox here. So this div is going to have the class of section subtitle container. And then I'm just going to have a span here that has the class of subtitle number as well as has sparkles, like so. And then here we can just add 02. And underneath we are going to be using an h5, and this one is going to have the class of title as well and section subtitle. And then we can just do projects. So let's go back to the main project that we have, and it's already showing up. So for the next portion, we are going to have another container for each card, or all the cards, I should say, in general. So I'm going to call this one portfolio cards. And then I'm also going to apply the class of dgrid. Then in here, I'm going to have a container for each individual item. And for this, I'm going to use an anchor tag. I'm going to apply the class of portfolio card, as well as a class of card. Well, I can just do portfolio. And I did it earlier before I actually finished typing the rest. So I'm just going to copy it from here, paste it here again, and just add number 1 so that we can select it individually later. So inside of this anchor tag, I'm going to have a div. This div is going to have the class of card image. And then I'm going to have the image itself. So this image, again, inside of the assets folder, images folder, and the image that we want to use here is going to be mtn. Just like so. Then underneath of this div for the card image, we are going to have the card heading. So again, card heading. And then here we are going to have an h5 that has the class of card title. Now I don't want this to have the general styles for all the other titles that we have because the text is going to be different. So that's why I'm only giving it this class. And then we can just say mtn. Actually, it's mntn, like so. And then we can just have a span underneath that has the class of card subtitle, like so. And we can say that this was a web design project and you also developed it. So development, like so. So now that we have the structure for a card, it's as simple as just copying it from here and we can paste it down a few more times. I think I had 5 of them, well 6 of them if you include this fancy button that we have here. So right there we have 1. We can change this one to 2, 3, 4. Actually, we have 5 already. So it should be 2 here, 3, 4, and 5. So we need 1 more, which is going to be number 6. So the next thing that we have to do here is just basically change the images. So the second one is going to be block chained. And then we can just change the text here, block chained. And here we can say that it was an app design. So that's already shown up. Don't worry about the size. We're going to take care of that later when we add the CSS. So for the third one, this one is going to be the, I believe it was Reese talk. And then we are going to do the same thing by changing the name. And then this one, let's just say it was a dashboard design. For the fourth one here, this one is going to be for our sound. Change the text here as well. And this one we can just say web design. Finally, for the fifth one, we can do here Landy. And this one we can say that it's web design as well. So the only difference here is going to be for these 6, 1, and this is going to be basically we have to get rid of all of this because this is going to be for the button. This is going to have the class of portfolio card as well as the class of portfolio card 6, but we also want to add another class, and this one is going to be large button container. Then inside of here, I'm going to have, and this should be a div instead of an anchor tag. So let's get rid of the href like so. And now we can place the anchor tag inside of there. And this anchor tag is going to have the class of large button as well as button fill like so. And then for the text, we can say view, and we can add a line break here. So view all, like so. And yeah, that's going to be it for this section. So let's go back inside of the style sheet so that we can work on it. Just scroll up a little bit more right there. So to begin, as I said, back inside of the style sheet, what we are going to do here is start by selecting the section title container. In this, we are going to make it a display of inline block so that it takes only as much space as it needs. So this way, when we do the display flex here, we can align this to the right at the end of the text. If we didn't do that, the default is going to be blocked. So if I was to use flexbox, for example, to align it to the end, it wouldn't line up here. It would line up all the way to the end here. So that's why we do inline block. Then the margin bottom for separation is going to be 5 rem. Then for the section title, we are going to be using font size here and then clamp again so that we can have some responsive typography. So here the minimum is going to be 4 rem, 10 rem, not 10 rem, but 10 of the viewport width, and then finally 8 rem for the maximum. So let's not forget to add in the commas like so. So now it's going to be the same concept. So if we go ahead, for example, and rescale this again, you see how it's going to adjust. And yeah, that's going to be it for that. Let's go ahead and select now the section subtitle container. Here, we are going to do a display of flex, then align item center so that these two are going to line up. And next thing that I want to do is add justify content of space between. Right now, there's not really enough space because it's taking up most of it, but we are going to take care of that shortly. Let me just go back here, make sure. So I have the section title here. Did I make a mistake? Because this one should actually be smaller. And yeah, that's because this should be section subtitle. Well, not this one, but the one at the bottom here. Section subtitle, like so. So now it's going to be smaller, and you see that we get the space separation. So back in here, what we are going to do next is add a column gap. So it's going to be here. Just so that when we get to smaller screens, you know, these two are going to get closer together. So we want to make sure that we have some spacing in between them. So column gap of 1.5 rem. Then I'm going to select the subtitle number. And here, what I want to do is give this a width, 5 rem. Then a height of 5 rem. Then I'm going to give this a border. It's going to be 2 pixels, solid. And then we are going to do the dark color. I'm going to apply a border radius of 50% now to make it round. And then I can do display flex, align items center, and justify content to the center as well so that I can center the number in the middle. Now I'm going to basically add in the sparkles. So what I'll do is subtitle number here has sparkles before, and then we can do a width here of 1 rem, height of 1 rem as well. And now it's starting to show up. So we have to do this on the after as well. So now we have 2 of them basically on top of each other. So what we can do now is select them individually so that we can move them around. This one is going to have a top starting position of -0.5 rem. And then to the right, it will be at -0.5 rem. Let's do the same thing for the after. And here for the top, what we want to do is say that, actually not the top, but the bottom, we want to do the opposite. Well, it's going to be still the same thing, but just on the opposite direction. So -0.5 rem. And then here for the left, we can do the same thing. Negative 0.5 rem. So now they're exactly where we want them to be. Now I'm going to go ahead and select the section subtitle so that I can also basically have it be responsive. So section subtitle. And this is going to have a clamp. So I'm going to be lazy again, copy it from here. And then I'm only going to change the values here. So I'm going to make this 2, this one 5, and this one 4, like so. Now I'm going to work on the cards. So did I make sure that I add in the grid class? Yes, I did. So now I'm going to select the portfolio cards. And this is going to have a gap, which is going to be 2.5 rem. Now I'm going to select the card image. And the card image is going to have a height that is going to be 30 rem. Then I'm going to set the background color to be B3 BBCE. Next, I'm going to give it a margin bottom of 2.5 rem for additional separation. And then I'm going to give this a border radius of 0.4 rem, like so. Now I'm going to give this a display of flex, align items to the center, then justify content to the center as well. What I'm going to do now is target the image inside of the card image container. This is going to have a width of 100%, a height of 100%, and then I want to object fit contain, like so. So now my images are fitting inside of my container nicely. Then what I'm going to do is apply padding all around of 1 rem, just so that it's not so close together to the edge. And now I can go ahead and add the hover effect here. So I'm going to say that when we hover over the portfolio card, I want to target the card image and apply the following background. So the background color is going to be FF and then 7575, like so. We also want to add this in as a focus effect, like so. Let me just get rid of that. And everything should still work the same. So let's go ahead and add a transition here to the card image. And it's going to be on the background color over 0.25 seconds. So now it is animated a little bit better. Let's go ahead and style the card heading. And here I'm going to do a color, which is going to be the dark color, followed by the card title. And this is going to have a font size of 2 rem. Then the card subtitle. And this is going to have a font size that is going to be smaller at 1.4 rem. And then the opacity is going to be 0.8, just so that it's slightly lighter. So the next thing that I'm going to do now is dial up the button that we have here. And that's going to be simple here. So let me just target the large button container. And I'm going to give this a display of flex, just for certain centering purposes. So now I'm going to select the large button. It will have a width of 15 rem. Then the height is going to be 15 rem as well. Border radius is going to be 50%. Then I want to do a display of inline flex. Then I want to align the text to the center. So I'll do align items center, and then justify content to the center as well. I'm going to apply the font family here, which is going to be the title font family. And I want to do a font size of 3 rem, followed by a font weight of 300 to make it lighter. And then the text transform is going to be set to uppercase. Finally, to center this button, what I'm going to do is give it a margin of auto, like so. And I'm also going to do a text align of center here. So now it's centered. And now I'm going to target the button fill class. So this is where I'm going to be adding a border, and the position is going to be relative since we are going to be having a pseudo element that just animates in, which is going to be the background color. So as opposed to using a border here, I'm just going to be using an outline, 2 pixels, solid, and then the dark color. And this should be inside a var, dark color, like so. And here we want to do a transition, which is going to be on the color, and it will be over 0.25 seconds, just like so. Then what we can do now is target or create the pseudo element, which is going to be the before. Content here is going to be an empty string. Then the width, 100%, height, 100%. The background color is going to be the dark color. Position is going to be of absolute, like so. And starting top position, 0, left, 0. C index is going to be -1 so that we send it to the back. And we also want to basically scale this all the way to the bottom. Well, not to the bottom, but so that we are not able to see it. So transform scale, and we are going to set this to 0. We also want to do a border radius here for this, but since we are going to be reusing it for this other button, we don't really want to use it at all. So we will just target this button specifically. And here we are going to be adding a transition as well. Transition is going to be on the transform over 0.5 seconds, and the animation easing is going to be a cubic Bezier with the following values: 0, 0.135, then we have 0.15, and then 0.86. What I'm going to do now is just select this button specifically, and we have to make sure we specify that it's the large button, like so. And now we can have the border radius of 50%. So if we briefly comment out this scale, you'll see that it's now round. So the next thing that I want to do is basically show it on hover. So to do so, I'm going to select button fill, and we'll say that when we hover over it, we want to target the before, and we also want to do this on focus. And here, what we are going to do is just turn back the transform scale back to 1. Let's not forget the comma here. And now if we hover over it, we should see it, which we do, but it's growing from the middle, and that's not exactly what we want. So here we are going to add a transform origin, bottom, right. Actually, should be left. Like so. But you can still see it all the way outside. So let's go back to the main container here. Let's add an overflow of hidden. And now when we hover over it, we only see it inside of the button. We also have to change the color. So what we are going to do is select the button fill. I'm actually going to do it here. So button fill. On hover, we want to change the color. So color, light color. Let's also add the focus here. Just like so. So now everything should be working exactly how we want it to work. So the next section that we are going to be working on is going to be the contact section. So let me just quickly write a comment here. Contact styles, like so. And let's go back inside of the index.html. And this section is going to have some things in common with something like the other sections that we have. For example, here we have the heading, and then this portion right here where we have text and an image. So that's exactly what we are going to be doing here. So let's scroll back up here and let's borrow this right here, this portion, paste it here, and let's make sure that we close the divs. So this one was for the container and the other one for the section. Just like so. And we have to change this to contact. Actually, I'm going to call it get in touch, like so. And then for the ID, I'll just call this contact. Then here, we can just change the text that we have here to get in touch. Let's see how that looks. Looks pretty good. And yeah, so since we already have the IDs for each section, let's go ahead and just change those here. So this one is going to be for about me. Did I call it about me or was it about? So yeah, about me. Then this one, portfolio. And this one, contact. So now if we try out the links, they should work. So about me, it's going to scroll to the about me section. If we do, for example, portfolio, scrolls down. Let's also go ahead and add the scroll behavior of smooth to the body. Well, not the body, but the HTML document. And now the smooth scrolling should be a lot better. And it is. So yeah, as I mentioned, this is going to be pretty similar to the other section. So let's go ahead and borrow this that we have here, which is going to be section description. And we can just go ahead and paste it here underneath of the section title container. And all we have to do here now is just change the images. So this one is going to be for the contact get in touch. So the get in touch image. And then we can just change the text that we have. Again, I'm going to include the text so that you don't have to type it in manually. Like so. And yeah, the only thing that we have to do now is just add in the form and this button. So for this, we are going to go underneath of this section description div. And what we are going to do is have another div. Let me just add some spacing here, just so that it's more readable. So here we are going to have a div that has the class of form container. Just give myself some more room here. And inside of here, we are going to have a form that has the class of contact form, like so. So the action, we can just leave it empty. And then we are going to have a div in here that is going to have the class of input group. Then I'm going to have an input in here. So the input is going to, well, first, this is going to be a container that has the class of input. And then inside of it, this is where I'm going to have the input and the label. So the input is going to be of type text. Then I'm going to have an ID here of name. And then we don't really need a placeholder there. Then underneath, actually, I'm going to add a label instead, add another input. So this label is going to be for this ID. So you just type in the name to tie them both together. As far as the class name, I'm just going to, and this should be inside of here. So class input label, like so. And then I can just do here name. And then I'm going to have a span in here that has the class of required field, like so. And then we'll just have a star there. So that looks good. Now I'm going to add another input, and this one is going to be for the email. So I'm going to grab this, paste it down below, and then I can just change this one from type of text. Well, not type of text, but here we can change the ID to email. You could also do the required by default, but at the same time, this is not something that we are going to make functional, but if you are, you should. And actually, I'm going to just add it in for the sake of it. But obviously, if you were to make this functional, you still need to add validation within JavaScript and whatever backend language you're going to be using. Required. And it keeps refreshing, but that's because of the scroll behavior that we have here. So now it should be just fine. Then we can change this one to email, like so. And then this is for email. So that's going to be our first group. Now we are going to add one more, which is going to be for the message. And we are going to place this one underneath. So the reason why I grouped them together here is because on larger screens, these two are going to be side by side on the same column that I'm going to basically use Flexbox on this. So underneath here, what I'm going to do is just add the other input. So I can just copy this, paste it down below. This is going to be type of text. I'm going to change this to message, and then here message as well. Input label, that still remains the same. And this I can change to message. So the only thing that we have to add in now is going to be the button. So this button is going to be of type submit, and it's going to have the class of button, form, button, and then button fill. And then for the text, we can just say send message, like so. And that's going to be it for this form that we have here. The one thing that I do plan on doing right now, since we're already here and there's really not a lot to the footer, I'm going to add the markup for the footer as well. And then later on, we can just take care of everything together within the CSS, as opposed to having to come back for it. So here, we're going to use the footer element, apply the class of footer, then a container inside of it. And then inside of this container, I'm also going to apply a secondary class. So footer container, just so that I can manipulate this item without having to select this particular container class. So then what I'm going to do is add a div, and this div is going to have the class of social media. Then inside of it, I'm going to have a list. And then this is going to be the same thing as the navigation. So list item, and then list link, like so. So inside of here, we are going to have the icons for the social media. So BX, BXL, actually, yeah, BXL, and then Twitter. And this should already be showing up. So let me see if I didn't make a mistake. So we have BX, BXL, Twitter. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. Let's try that again. BX, BXL, and then Twitter. So let me see. Is it like blending in? Is that why I can't see it? Oh yeah, that's why I can't see it. It's just blending in. So for example, if I did color here, made it like black, it's not showing up. So yeah, that was the issue. And this should be Twitter, not Twitch. And then we'll just do the same thing for the other icons. The second one is going to be for Instagram. Then we have GitHub. And lastly, I think we had LinkedIn. Like so. Now we are going to add the copyright information that we have here, as well as the back to the top button. And to do that, we are going to find the social media div, and we are going to add a space there just for separation so that it's more readable. And then here we can just use a span, and we'll use ampersand copy, and that's going to generate the copyright symbol. And then we can just do 2022 Bruno, all rights reserved. Finally, we are going to add in the button for the scrolling up portion, and that's going to have a class of scroll top. And then here we can just use the ID of home, which is what we gave to the header right here. So it's going to scroll all the way back to the top when we click it. And then we can just add in the icon, which is going to be having the class of BX, then BX chevron, and this one is going to be up, chevron up. And then outside, we can do a space back to top. Like so, and that's pretty much it for the footer. So now if we click it, you'll see that it takes us all the way back to the top. So let's go back inside of the styles.css, scroll all the way down here, and then we have the contact comment here. And the first thing that we are going to do here is style the input. This is going to have the position of relative, and then a margin bottom for separation of 5 rem. Then what I'm going to do is target the input label. This input label is going to have a position of absolute, then starting top position of 0, 0 to the left. Text transform is going to be of uppercase. Font weight is going to be bold. And I want to transition here, so this is going to be on the transform over 0.25 seconds. Then I'm going to select the input inside of the input div. The width here is going to be 100%. The border bottom is going to be 1 pixel, solid, dark color, like so. Then I'm going to add padding all around, which is going to be 0.5 rem. Next thing that I want to do now is that when we focus here, we want to basically move up the label. So to do so, we are going to use the adjacent selector. So here we'll do input. And then when the input is focused, we want to select the input label that it's right after it. So input label. And what we want to do is transform, translate y negative 2.5 rem. So now if we focus inside of it, notice how it just moves up, like so. We also have to style the button here some more. And we'll say form button. Display here is going to be inline block. Then I'm going to apply a padding top and bottom of 1 rem and 2 rem left and right. Then the text transform is going to be of uppercase. And I'm also going to add a margin 0 of auto so that I can center it in the middle. Like so. Actually, nothing happened. So let me just double check. That's exactly how I had it here. So margin 0 auto form. You see contact form. Oh, so here, where is it? So contact form. This should be a display of flex. And then I want to change the flex direction to column. So now the button should be aligning in the middle, which it is. The last thing that I want to now style is going to be the required field. So that's going to be the little star. And this is just going to have a font size of 1 rem, then a color of FF7575. And then I'm going to do a transform translate here on the Y, just so that I can move it a little bit up, just like so. And that's pretty much everything we need for the form. So let's go ahead now and style the footer. So let's add another comment here. We'll say footer styles. And it should be 2 O's, 1 T. So for the footer, I'm going to select the footer container. I'm going to give this a display of flex. Then I want to align my items to the center. And this is also going to have a justify content, space between. Should be between, not around. And I want my content there to also wrap once we don't have enough space. So I'm doing a flex wrap of wrap. And then I also want to have a gap of 1.5 rem, a border top that's going to be 1 pixel, solid. And then here I'm going to use the border top color. Like so. Then I'm going to apply a padding top, and it's going to be 5 rem, and a padding bottom of 1.5 rem, like so. Then I'm going to select the footer link. So footer link, footer list link. Let me make sure that I get rid of this. And the color here is going to be the dark color. So now we should be able to see the icons, just like so. And the hover effect is also working there. Then I'm going to style the scroll top. And here I'm going to give this a display of flex, just for alignment purposes. Line items center. And then the color, let's also make sure that it's always the dark color. And it works. So here just takes us all the way back to the top. We still need a hover effect here. So what we can do is just grab this. And where we have the links here for the hover effect, we can just basically go ahead and add this in as well. Let's say on hover and then on focus. Like so. So let's just fix that. And let's see if everything still works fine. And it is. So that's good. So now comes the fun part. This is where we are going to style the project here with the media queries. Actually, before we get to the media queries, let's quickly just go ahead and style these scroll bars, because I almost forgot that I did that for this project here. It's going to be very simple though. Another comment, scroll bar. And what we are going to do here is just select the WebKit scroll bar. Let's give this a width of 1 rem. Then we are going to do the scroll bar track. Ended up clicking that by mistake. So scroll bar track. And this is going to have the background color, which is going to be the dark color. Then what we are going to do is select the scroll bar thumb. And the thumb is just going to have a background color as well. That is going to be the following: B3. And finally, what we need is the styles when we hover over it. So that's just going to be a darker shade, as you can see right here. And to do that, all we have to do is just say scroll bar thumb, hover. Then the background color is going to be the following hex of 808694. And now that works just fine. So now let's go ahead and add the media queries. So the first breakpoint is going to be at 768 pixels. So we're going to do at media screen. And now we have to specify the breakpoint itself. So min width, since we are working with mobile first. So min width 768 pixels. What we are going to do here is target now the inline image. But before that, let me just go all the way back up. And I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit here, just so that we can get the amount that we need to see the changes. So inline image. And this here is going to have a width of 15 rem. Height is going to be 15 rem as well. And now we have to rearrange the sparkles. So inline image has sparkles before. This one is going to be having a width of 1.5. Then the height is going to be 1.5 as well. And then the position towards the top, 1 rem. Then towards the right, we are going to do negative 1 rem as well. Just like so. We are going to do the same thing now for the after. And the sizing here is going to be 1 rem instead. And then we can do 1.5 for the top and then 1.5 for the right. But this value here for the top is actually going to be positive, like so. Now let's go ahead and style the section description. So section description here, all we are going to do is add a grid template columns. And we are just going to repeat this. Well, we're not going to repeat this because we want to make this side with the text slightly larger. So we're going to do 1.5 FR. And then the side that has the image is going to be 1 FR. Now it's not aligned into the center here. So I'm going to do align items center, just like so. Then I'm going to select the description, which is going to be the text. And the font size is going to be 2.4 rem, just because I want to make it larger. Now I'm going to select the description image. And this is just going to get a width of 30 rem, then a height here of 30 rem as well. The other thing that I want to do now is target the portfolio cards. So let me just make this even bigger here. So the portfolio cards. And what I want to do next, let me scroll to that section, which is this one. And let me get rid of this because it's refreshing back to the top. Let me just do it here. But anyways, what we want to do here is apply a grid template columns, which is going to be repeated 8 times 1 FR each. So I messed around with it. That's just what I found works for me. And then we can just go ahead and span them individually. So let me just open up the inspector here so that we can see what's going on. Obviously, it's not gonna be looking too good because of the limited space. So here, this is the grid that we have. We are going to show the grid, make this even smaller, and this smaller as well. So now we can see it taking effect. And now we want to select them individually and kind of just like position them where we want them. So we are going to start with the portfolio card 1. This one, I wanted to start at grid column 1, and then I wanted to end up at 6, which is going to be here, like so. And it's kind of just like doing a full reload here. So let me just take care of that so that we don't have to keep refreshing the entire page. So let me see, live server right here. It's doing a full reload. So let me just untick that. And now everything should be fine. So let me just bring it all the way in, like so. Select the grid here so that we can show it. And then I kind of, as opposed to defining the grid template rows, I'm just gonna have CSS grid do it automatically by having basically each item here just span a certain amount. So for the grid row, what I'm going to do is say start at 1 and then span 10, like so. And for number 2, what I'm going to do, I'm still doing it anyways. I think that probably just have to refresh the page, but for the time being, I'll just leave it as it is. So for number 2, I want this one to start at 6 and basically span all the way to the end, like so. Then what I'm going to do is say that for the grid row, I want it to start at 2 and then span 10. So I'm just basically going to keep repeating this all over again and just make some slight changes. So for number 3, we can have this one start at 1, span to 5. Then this one can start at 11, and then it's going to span 10. Then for number 4, we want this one to start at 5 and go all the way to the end. Then for the grid row portion, this one is going to start at 12 and span 10. Then for number 5, this one is going to start at 4. Then it's going to span all the way to the end. And should be, let me see, number 4 starts at 5, 10. So number 4. Then we have number 5, so 4, 1. Then we can start this one at 22. And again, we just span 10 more. So finally, we have number 6. And here, just so that we can visualize it. So number 6 is going to start at 1 here on the column. And then it's going to span till 4, which is about here. And then towards the row side of thing, it's going to start at 21, which is about here. And it's going to span basically all the way to the end. So again, for number 6, we start at 1, go to 4, and then we say start at 21 here and go to 10. So now we have all the items positioned exactly where we want them to go. I know it's kind of confusing if you don't visualize it, but I was having that issue with the reloading. Hopefully it still made sense. So the next thing that I'm going to target now is going to be the input group. So we are going to put these two together. We are going to do a display of flex, and then we are going to apply a column gap, which is going to be 5 rem, like so. Then the input is going to have a width of 100% so that it stretches all the way across, like so. And now we can go ahead and style the footer container. So for the footer container, we are just going to give this a padding block, which is going to be 5 rem top and bottom. So it's going to make it larger, like so. So if I make this all the way big, or bigger, I should say, you see that navigation still works. So does the dark mode. You can see the radial gradient there. Everything's still working here. So I'm just going to go inside of the responsive view here. You'll notice how everything is just going to adjust based on the width. Like so, everything still looks pretty good. So I did mention that thing that we could probably add another media query, maybe like right about here, or maybe 500, just to keep the container smaller, fixed for a fixed amount, until we get to the one we have here. So instead, as opposed to doing that, what I'll do is come back inside of Visual Studio, and by default, I'm going to find the default styles that the container has. So the max width here is going to be this one. So it's going to be 96. So what I was thinking is that we can do, actually we can get rid of this. We don't really need a variable for that. So to start with, we are going to specify, let's say, a max width of 54 rem. And that's going to change it by making it so much smaller. So that looks better already. So the next thing that we want to do is change it once we get to this breakpoint, because at this point, it doesn't really look good anymore. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And it's going to be pretty simple. All we have to do is just select the container once more inside of the media queries here. If I can find them. So right here, make sure we close that. And now all we have to do is just change this back to 96 rem. So it should be working fine again. So we're almost done now. The only thing left to do is add in the scroll reveal animations, and then we have to deploy this to the web. So let's take care of that right now. So going back inside of the app.js file, here we are going to add another comment right here. Let's just say scroll reveal, like so. And what we are going to do here is first initialize scroll reveal. So we are going to say SR for scroll reveal. And then here we can say scroll, and there should be capital. So scroll reveal. Can't type for some reason. So once we do that in here, we can just pass in some options inside of this object. And we are going to start with the default distance. And the default distance here that I want to set up is going to be 50 pixels. Then the duration of the animation. This is going to be 1500. And then finally, the easing. So for the easing, I'm going to be using a cubic Bezier. And this is going to have the following values. So 0, 68. Then in here, we can do negative point, well, let's just do 0. So 0.55. Then we are going to do 0.265. Finally, we are going to do 1.55. So now that we initialized it, we have to select whatever it is that we want to animate. So in this case, again, we just have to reference scroll reveal, and then we just say reveal. Then in here, what we can do is select the element that we want to animate. So we are going to select the main title, like so. And then we just pass in the options. So in this case, what I want to do is set the origin, meaning where the title is going to animate from. So the origin here is going to be top, just like so. So if we go ahead and test that out, well, it didn't work. Let's see what happened there. So origin. Oh, so that's because this is supposed to be wrapped around curly braces, like so. So now if we refresh the page, notice how the title is being animated in. So the next one that we are going to do is going to be this and this as well. And what I'll do is just copy this down below. Now I'm going to select the scroll reveal. Remember, this is the class that we added. This isn't really part of it. I just wanted to basically make a note of where I wanted to animate this particular element. And then here for the origin, we can just do left. Now we are going to animate the one on the right. And origin is going to be right. So let's take a look at that. And as you can see, when they come into view, they animate exactly where we want them to go. Now for this, what I want to do is basically just have an interval as how they're going to animate. So one's going to animate, then the other one, and then the other one, and so on. And here for this one, all I'm going to do is select the text stack item. And then for the origin, we don't really want to specify. Well, in this case, I didn't really want to specify one. So I'll just have it animate from the default origin. What I'll do here is add an interval though, which is going to be 250 milliseconds. So now when I get to that portion, notice how they're all animating one after the other. And by default, they're going to animate from the bottom to the top. The next one that I want to target is going to be the section title as well as the section subtitle. So for this, we are just going to use the backticks instead. So that's going to allow us to select multiple. And we use a comma there. And now we can select the section, subtitle, container here. And this one, we are going to change it to section title. Now we want to add an origin here as well. So let me just bring this into a new line since we are going to be having multiple things. And here we are going to add an origin. And this origin is going to be top, like so. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Right there, you see that it's working. Let's move on to the next one. And the next one is going to be for the portfolio card. So let me just copy this one, paste it underneath. And now I can just change this to portfolio card, like so. And then I just want to add in an interval, which is going to be 500 milliseconds. And as you can see, they're already animating in when they come into view. Then I'm going to select the form container as well as the footer. So it's going to be the same deal as this one. So I'm just going to copy that. And now I can just change this one to form container. And then this one to the footer, like so. And what I want to do here is just change the origin to be the top. And I guess since we are also animating these basically from the top as well, you could just add them here if you wanted to save a few lines of JavaScript, but I'm not really going to do that right now. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the animations, as you can see. So the next part is going to be deploying this to the web. So see you soon. All right, so here I am on netlify.com. This is the platform that I'm going to be using to deploy the website. There's many out there, but this is just what I'm going to use. You can do it for free, but obviously if you want to get something like a domain and so on, you're going to have to pay for it. So you can either import a project by using Git, or you can browse templates, or you can just drag and drop your files. So just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to grab this folder, which is for the project, and I'm going to drop it in. As you can see, it's now processing. Once it's done, it's going to let you know that it's published. You can set up your own custom domain if you have one. If you don't, you're going to have to buy one. So obviously, as you can see here, the URL is not the most professional looking one. So that's why you should have your own domain if you plan to use this for business or just like branding yourself. So these are the other steps that you can take if you were to take it that far. I believe Netlify, they also sell domains, so you could get them through them if you wanted to. But like I said, this is just for demo purposes. Something that you can do, however, is you can change the name of the site. So for example, I can do Julio codes, and then here I can do Bruno. Still not the most professional looking URL, but it's better than what we had before. So now if we go ahead, for example, and click it here, you notice that it is actually deployed on the web and everything works exactly how it should. If we go ahead and take a look at the responsive view right here, let me just boost this up a little bit more. And it's not going to be taking effect that much there on the responsive view, but now it looks obviously still the same. It just looks larger. Same thing for the theme selection here. And if we take a look at the responsive view, everything still looks great. So yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful. And if you did, make sure that you like the video and subscribe if you still haven't. I'll see you guys in the next one.